Well, good evening and welcome to the Town Hall Get to Know Show. We have a wonderful guest this evening for you. Make sure that you are watching on Facebook to share this video out. Tell your friends. Go ahead, put it in those groups. We appreciate that. We will take questions, comments, or your thoughts. Put them in the comments, and we'll address as many as we certainly can. We want to thank E360 TV and our sponsors, Total Coatings, as well as Cool Today. We'll be giving you some information on them in a little bit here. But we certainly appreciate them because they keep these broadcasts coming to you. This show, Town Hall, is about people that are making a positive impact in community, in our society. And so we're going to be talking about how they make this positive impact. It's about success stories, about what they've been doing to become successful. And so we've got a special guest here tonight, Guy Brilando. We've actually been talking about having him on the show for a little bit. I'm so glad that he is with us tonight. I do want to start with a quote from Tony Robbins. Goals are like magnets. They'll attract the things that make them come true. It's good to have goals. It's good to set goals. And by setting goals and then putting down the steps that it takes to achieve those goals, we're able to achieve our dreams. By the law of attraction, the things will happen in our life that attract these things to be able to manifest in our life. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about Guy. He's such a super guy. As a matter of fact, he is a veteran, and so we appreciate his service to our country as well. He is a best-selling author. He's also a certified NLP. I don't know if you know NLP, but NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. It's about thinking. So we're going to be talking about thinking tonight. He's an NLP master. He's also a motivational speaker. He's an entrepreneur and a Navy veteran. He's also was a commercial pilot for I think about 20 years, as a matter of fact. He makes a positive impact in our society. He is the author of Discovering Your Authentic Truth. And it's a journey about the deeper workings of your mind and communication, right? The guy is passionate and he helps others to experience their true value in life. He professes that we're born in love and then life happens. Then we become disconnected sometimes from ourselves. And so he works one on one with individuals, transforming them and identifying things in their past to become their desired future and guides them to fall in love with themselves again. And that's where it does start. It starts with loving ourselves, and then we're really in a position to be able to love others better. But for some people, it's very tough to start with that love because we've been told a lot of stuff over our life. And I know for myself, I struggled with low self-esteem for a very long time. And so we're going to be talking about that tonight. I want you to stay tuned. We've got a great show. I want to tell you just a couple more things before we bring in Guy here about him. I mentioned that he is a veteran, and so we honor him for that. He actually had over 3,600 hours flown in the F-16 with over 200 combat hours. How awesome is that? Has a Bachelor of Science in Aeronautical Science, as well as a Master's in Aviation and Aerospace Management. He was a Southwest Airlines commercial pilot for how long? From 2007 to 2020. So that's like 13 years. A best-selling author. We talked about that, Discovering Your Authentic Truth. He is also involved in a multi-level marketing program. We're going to talk about that. We're going to be talking about CBDs, as a matter of fact, this evening. That is silly by design. I think I said that right, or it's silly by design, but we'll have him clarify that for us in just a moment. He's also involved in community service in the past with a volunteer for fifth grade classes, the Lions Club. He's also been involved in public speaking with Toastmasters, an advocate for Streetlight USA, and a volunteer for the Freedom Rock Experience. And so, with no further ado, let's bring in Guy Brilando. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Hello, Stephen. Thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We are so pleased to have you here this evening, Guy. This is so awesome. Thank you for joining us
Well, it is a
all the
great honor.
way from Colorado, Keystone, Colorado.
That's right. We were
Really?
just out skiing. We just got in about a half hour ago, and I said, "Hey, I need to get changed back into civilian clothes here."
I haven't been snow skiing in a long time. It's so much fun.
Oh, we just love it. It's one of the. This has been our dream for a very long period of time, and we were finally able to make it happen. So we're very excited.
Excellent, excellent. Now Colorado is pretty famous for beer, as a matter of fact.
It is.
Does
There's
this
quite a few
Keystone beer
breweries
come
in
from
this area.
Keystone, Colorado?
Say again. I'm sorry.
Does the Keystone beer, I think I've heard of a Keystone beer, does that come from Colorado then? Do you
It
know?
could be. I'm not familiar. I know there's a lot of private breweries around here
Yeah.
and stuff. But we just moved here in August, so we're still exploring.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so you're just getting familiar there, and you've got some of the best skiing country in the
Mm,
universe out there too, as a matter of fact.
yeah,
Well, I'll tell you what, Guy, I'd like you just to do a quick intro and just help the viewers get to know you a little bit better.
sure. Yeah. I mean, you did such a great job with that
Did I
intro, and
leave any room there? I'm sure there's something for you to talk about now.
yeah. So, one of the things that I love about people is learning their stories. And when you learn their personal stories, you've oftentimes, if you really listen to what they have to say, you'll learn something new about yourself you didn't even know. So, in sharing my story, I hope that somebody out there listening can gain some insight for themselves and may help themselves, with whatever may be challenging them at the moment as well. But yeah, I grew up in Chicago. My dad was the executive vice president for Schwinn Bicycles. That's how he retired. If you ever rode a Schwinn bicycle growing up, my dad is probably the guy that designed it.
Wow.
He was a two-time Olympian, 48 and 52. He was a Pan American. He's just renowned. He built many or designed many of the velodromes around the states. The bicycle tracks and stuff. So he was a top notch engineer in that, and we were very blessed. We had a great growing up. I literally was probably one of the luckiest kids around because every week it seemed like I had a new bike, and the kids loved me because we all had bicycles growing up from the Schwinn factory. We got all the prototypes, so that was great. And I really wanted to go in and study the stars. The heavens has always been my biggest passion. I built my own telescope. I'd sit out there on the cold nights of Chicago and just sit out there in the driveway and watch the stars for hours. And then when it came time for college, my third year in college, mechanics and the third year of calculus really started, kind of kicking my butt. And I was realizing that I wasn't as smart as I thought I was, and it wasn't coming very naturally for me. So my dad had asked if I wanted to learn how to fly, and I had always wanted to. I just never could really afford it on my own. And we went right down, signed myself up for lessons. I started flying, and then after the third year of college there in Chicago, I transferred to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach. And what a
Hmm.
godsend that was. And so that's where I fell into the military, and I spent 20 years. I lived in Korea and Germany and Italy. In Germany is where I met my wife of Elka 30 years ago, almost to the day today. And we've been very, very happily married ever since. And we moved down to Italy together. We were there for a little over 3 years. And then we moved to Phoenix, and we were in Phoenix for 23 years. And during that period of time, we're going to get to it probably, but that's
Hmm.
when the whole transformation that I went through, that I really, it just changed my life, and what my book is a lot about, to help other people realize that there's answers out there. That all happened while we were in Phoenix. And like you mentioned, I am in a MLM, and in a
Hmm.
year's time from getting started with that, where we were able to move up here to Colorado, and I was able to retire from Southwest Airlines 7 years early. So the part of that
Okay.
story was, as I finished the military, I stepped over to Southwest Airlines, and I was there, like you said, 13 years. So that's kind
Well,
of the background.
that's so awesome. So certainly looking up to the sky, the stars, and flying has been something that, is a lifelong thing.
Yes, it really has.
Yeah.
I talk about it in my book, but I used to lay out on a raft in the pool, and I just watched the clouds and the planes going by, for O'Hare, and it was something that had always fascinated me. And to be able to get up and touch the clouds, to get up to those nice white puffy clouds and to get near them, that was a dream, and I was able to live that dream for 33 years plus. So
Wow, that's so awesome.
yeah.
Um, Before I back up a second, but I'll ask you about being that commercial pilot. What was it about flying planes commercially that you really enjoyed the most?
Well, Southwest Airlines is such an amazing company. They really take care of their people. They put the people first, and the environment, being around people that just love their job, and then being able to have that interaction with the public community. As a fighter pilot and a commercial airline pilot, it is two completely different things. Yes, you're flying an airplane, but it's two completely different types of flying. And it was a transition to get used to that. But what I really enjoyed about the commercial airline was really the people. Or being a commercial pilot, I really enjoyed the people. I loved taking care of them and making sure they got the smooth ride as much as we could. And there's the biggest challenge with commercial airline flying is the weather.
Hmm.
Finding your way, picking your way through the weather, because you're going to get from point A to point B. You just got to figure out how you're going to do it sometimes. And that was a challenge. So with everything, you try to find the challenge and make yourself a little bit better through that challenge. And so that's what I was able to do with that as a commercial airline pilot as well.
Very cool. So backing up then, you were a fighter pilot and you had actually 200 hours in these F-16s. Gosh, tell us what it's like doing that.
Yeah, so it was a little over 200 hours of combat time. I actually had, when I retired, when I stepped away from the F-16 world, I had over 3,600 hours. At that time, I was number 100, or was within the top 100 of all high time pilots that had flown the F-16 at that time. Now there's guys way beyond that, but it was pretty neat. It's unlike anything you can really describe, because the sensations that your body's going through all the time in that environment is very different than the average person would ever experience. I mean, the closest may be something like a roller coaster, but the difference between a fighter pilot, if you've ever seen the movie The Right Stuff, it's an
Mhm.
older movie now, but with Chuck, it was all kind of centered around Chuck Yeager and the early astronauts and what it took for them to be able to go through the program and become the first astronauts. And they call it The Right Stuff because to be a fighter pilot, you think a little bit differently. You have so many inputs coming in at you all the time. And like you're listening to probably about 7 different audio inputs all the time, not to mention you're listening to some of those being radios that you're having to communicate. You're also not just in control of your own airplane. You may be managing a large force employment where you're in charge of 50, 100 airplanes out there. And so the decision process that's going on constantly is what separates a fighter pilot from a regular pilot. Not everybody can handle it. And it's not an ego thing. It is what it is. And I really enjoyed that aspect of flying the
Yeah.
fighter, is because it was really interesting when I did the transition over to the commercial airline world. You fly initially in the right seat and then you upgrade to captain in the left seat. But in the right seat, you have a captain in the left seat. And the captain's very experienced. He's been doing this for a long time. And I had this one guy one night, we were flying at night up at altitude, and he goes, "You're always fidgeting." He goes, "I don't understand." He goes, "All you F-16 guys, or the fighter guys, you're always fidgeting." So he had never flown a fighter. He was a commercial guy his whole life. And he was asking, "Why is it that you guys are always kind of doing something?" And I said, "Because that's what we did as a fighter pilot." I mean, there was always something going on that you had to be thinking about and processing
Yeah.
and prioritizing what was the most important input that was coming in at this moment. In the commercial airline world, it's totally different. I mean, you're kind of, you get up to altitude, you set the autopilot, and there's nothing really much to do other than you're monitoring what's going on with the airplane and where you're at. So it's a
Right.
totally different environment in that regards. Yeah,
It sounds like the ultimate in multitasking.
it is. It truly is. Yes. And it's changed a lot with the advent of technology. The fighter world has changed tremendously. I wouldn't even recognize it today. A lot of it, everything's data linked.
Yeah.
So it's still a very task saturating environment, but it's changed. It's evolved. It's just different than when I was through it. I mean, I've been out of it now for, some 14 years. So it has
Right.
really, it's changed. I think
Well,
when I was flying, it was even better because it was a lot more hands-on. It was a lot more, we did a lot of low altitude stuff, which is phenomenal, flying at 500 feet, 250 knots. I mean, 250 feet at 500 knots, over 500 miles an hour, 250 feet. That's pretty eye-watering.
well, and knots is definitely going faster than miles per hour. That much I know.
Yeah.
That comes from my
Yep.
sailing stuff.
Yeah. I don't think I mentioned this to you, Stephen, either, that some people find exciting that I actually ejected from an F-16
Oh,
as well back when I was in Korea. And that was a pretty interesting experience, I have to admit. So
holy cow. Well, and right now got to just say I honor you and thank you for risking your life for the lives of Americans
now,
here and or whomever you happen to be protecting, but certainly America and showing that force. But thank you so very much, Guy. That's so awesome. Yeah, really appreciate you for that.
thank you. Thank you.
Now,
And,
I want
living overseas, I'll say this too, living overseas, it gave me a different perspective of America as well. It was really interesting. And obviously America's gone through a lot of changes in the last, 20 years since I've been overseas. But when I lived overseas, if somebody has never lived overseas, a lot of people have never even traveled outside of the United States. And so a lot of people haven't even traveled outside of their own state, right? Within the United States. But if you ever get the opportunity to travel, I really encourage you to do it because it is just, it's neat.
it's nice to see other cultures and see how different it is in other countries. And I know I was just talking about this. So many other countries, we've got it really good. Even at our worst, we've got it way good than a lot
We
of
do.
places. And that's where I think gratitude comes in for the things that we have. And I know that gratitude creates happiness for sure. Um, but I wanted you to talk a little bit about thinking. You're involved in you're an NLP master. Maybe
Yes,
you can explain to the
NLP.
viewers about NLP, and then I'd also like you to just kind of explain why you decided that because I know this is about helping people.
Uh-huh.
Why you decided to do that?
That's a great question, Stephen. And I know one of the reasons why we started kind of communicating a little bit more is because you've also found an interest in NLP. Is that true?
It is true. As a matter of fact, soon here I'll be getting certified for NLP. I have experience with CBT, which is the cognitive behavioral therapy. And so this, I think, is just going to be that next step up. I'm not certified in CBT. The truth of the matter was I was the patient, but I went through it, because my story is about making some poor choices and then, you know,
Yeah,
deciding to get my life back and be a positive asset to community than what I was doing. So I learned about that because I had to go through that to honestly be where I am today and be here on TV and with you. And if I hadn't have done all those things, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I
that's
know.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's one of the themes that, or at least from the master that I learned from, was that you are where you are because that's exactly where you're supposed to be. And when you take that kind of an attitude, you start taking responsibility for your life. And when you start taking the responsibility for your life, now you have control and you can take your life in the direction that you want to go. And you have definitely been able to do that, Stephen. So I congratulate you on your journey and
Yeah.
all the people and the thousands and thousands of people that you're touching now with where you've come. NLP, neuro linguistics programming, I didn't know much about it. I had heard of it. What had happened, well, let me just explain what it is first.
Yes.
Uh, uh, Richard Bandler and David Grinder, they created this. And what had happened is Bandler was a student and Grinder was the professor, and Bandler was helping out at he was doing his research in psychology, and he was working at Virginia Satter's location, and he was noticing that she was getting results with people very, very quickly. And where somebody would go and see her in 3 or 4 sessions, they're done. Whereas other therapists that they were analyzing and researching, they would, they'd have the same patients for years. And so Bandler's like, what is she doing that's so vastly different from everybody else? And they really started going into it. And what they were able to determine was a science. And they took language and they made it into a science on how we're coded in our minds. So everyone has an infinite way of seeing the world. And in NLP, we call it the map, an individual's map of the world. Everybody is made up differently. We all see things. We could have 4 or 5 people having a conversation. Those 4 or 5 people are going to walk away with a different interpretation of that conversation, and it will mean different to them. But what the key that they found and discovered is that how this is all processed in the brain is very limited, and it's very specific. It's basically ones and zeros, if you will. And so we get coded in our mind, and that coding comes out in various ways. It'll come out in physiology. It'll come out auditorial with the words that we use. It'll come out in just various different ways. And they were able to dissect what Virginia was doing and then expand upon it. And they're the ones that basically then put it all down on paper and created NLP, neuro-linguistics programming. Mm-hmm. So what it means to us today is that you could have had a trauma in your life. Maybe when usually it's going to be within the first 7 years of living. That's when you have basically no filters. You're in theta wave, brain's going at theta waves, and you have no filters. You don't have the wisdom and the knowledge that, we do when we're 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. Mm-hmm. And as a young child, anything that happens is all immediate input, and there's no protection from this to the subconscious mind. So it's all getting inputted back there or wherever the subconscious mind may be. We all got our own theories of where that is. So when that happens at a very young age, let's say the very first time you ever experience anger, it could be, you did something innocent as a child and the parent turned around and just gave you the wrath of anger. And it's the first time you ever experienced it. And you're like, what the heck did I just do? Before I was feeling love. Now all of a sudden, boom, this has just happened. So that gets imprinted. And that imprinting, in essence, as you continue through the years, will tend to guide your life on autopilot. You don't even realize some of the decisions that you make are based upon imprinting that happened early on. Right. So one of the things that NLP or neuro-linguistics programming can do is to literally go in and rewrite the ones and zeros, rewrite that programming in a very ecological way. So you don't necessarily have to re-experience the old event, but we can reconceptualize it. And when you do that, you create incredible amounts of freedom for the person, and the person helps get more connected to who they really are. So that's really kind of it in a nutshell.
Our thinking and perspectives are really based on the things that we learned that we were young, and that we were adding to it as we were getting older, certainly because we were making agreements with ourselves, whether we agreed or didn't, which became, our moral code and our belief system, correct?
Correct. And
that's what I love about this. And that's what I've learned because I've done it. But it takes consistency too, doesn't it, Guy?
It does. And one of the magical things about NLP is it happens very, very quickly. But what the art behind the science is getting that person so ready and willing to allow that transformation to happen. So that is one of the real big differences with NLP. But NLP is it's complex because it goes into we could talk on hours on just one aspect of NLP, but NLP is a very large topic.
Yes.
The language, the words you use. So, for instance, we all have our own modalities. Somebody may be primarily touchy feely or kinesthetic. Somebody may speak with typical words of, hey, I saw this last night, where somebody else may say, well, I heard this last night. Well, the person that said, I saw this last night is more visual. And the person that heard this last night, even though it was all the same event, this is the way they're describing it, is more auditory, and then you've got somebody, that may be audio digital, which is very process orientated. So listening to the types of language or the language that a person is using is giving you deep insights into how their brain is wired and what is their primary modality. So now you take that into whether you're in sales, whether you're a realtor, or you're doing anything that interacts with other people, which includes all of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you can understand the modality that they're using, what their primary language is,
Right.
and you reflect that back. So you shift your language to match their language, you build really deep rapport. And it's amazing. So those are some other aspects of NLP that can be very powerful in multiple ways.
Well, that's getting on the same level and that empathy factor
Yes.
of that of whoever you're dealing with, um, and listening. I know that I've had to learn to listen more. You know, uh, being I'm a speaker too, like you are as well, and so I can tend to talk too much. I'll admit that at times,
Yeah.
but it's so important to listen. Because actually that's being empathetic as well, and giving that other person respect to be able to speak.
That's right. Yep. Absolutely. One of the things that I'll talk this is not necessarily technical, and it's probably not by the book for NLP,
Right.
but this is my interpretation of it. And this is the way I help people try to explain it, because what you're really touching on right there, Stephen, is the ego.
Yes.
And the ego always wants us to be right. It's
Oh, yeah.
there to protect us, and it's got a very vital role. But the challenge is it always wants to be right. And so oftentimes when you're in a conversation with somebody, you're more focused on what you want to say than actually listening to what they have to say. And
Yeah.
when you're doing that, or if I'm in a conversation with somebody and I recognize that this is what they're doing, then I realize that they're really ego driven, and their ego has a lot of control over them. And one of the ways to kind of think about that is the way that I've always tried to describe it is that you have your subconscious mind, which is like big, and you have your conscious mind, which is very small.
Yes.
And the ego kind of like is a divider separating the conscious mind from the subconscious mind. And when we're doing with NLP and we're talking about rapport, what we're trying to do is lower that wall of the ego, bring down that barrier of the ego, so we can actually get in and have a conversation with the subconscious mind without the ego trying to protect it. And when we do the deeper work of NLP, that's exactly what we're doing. We're getting into the subconscious mind. We actually have a conversation with the subconscious mind that allows the healing to begin. Because up until then, if you had trauma, say you were a young girl and you were raped by your dad, your grandfather or uncle, which I've heard, I can't tell you how many times I've heard such a horror story.
Right.
That ego is serving you very well because it's protecting, right? And that trauma that happened at a young age is protecting you, or it's, so that you're not re-experiencing that trauma again. But the challenge is that it might keep you too safe, and it may hinder your actual growth from becoming who you really are. So if we can go back in time, which we do with NLP, and be able to eradicate that old trauma with the wisdom of the age you are at today, say 50 years old, that you're viewing it from a disassociated state. So you're actually looking upon it, you're not living it, and we can release it. You gain what the actual learnings were from that experience in a positive way, and we can eradicate it completely.
Yeah.
And,
And
in my
I
book, I
love
talk
this,
about
and that's
several
why
of
you're
them
here,
that
because, I know that we
I
connected on that level.
yes.
And it's so important, and that's why we're sharing it tonight, folks. We want you to know about this. We know that people can experience trauma, And even like my trauma, when I think I had it bad, it's not even close to the next person that might have experienced something. And so there is a process, and that process is involved, and it takes a lot of work to be able to achieve this stuff, but it can be done, and we can actually learn to love ourselves and love our life and enjoy every day. And gosh, that's why Guy is here. That's why I'm here, and that's what we're talking about tonight. I'd like to acknowledge our sponsor, Cool Today. We're going to go to a quick commercial, and then we'll be right back. Stick with us, though, because it's getting good. All right, thanks. We'll be right back. We want to thank Cool Today. They are our corporate sponsor so very much. Get the best from today with Cool Today. They can take care of all of your heating, air conditioning, electrical, as well as your plumbing needs. And they also do solar too. Customer satisfaction is what is the most important factor for them. They guarantee it 100% customer satisfaction. You can call for a free estimate. They'd be happy to help you. I'd also like to go to some comments here in just a moment. We've been talking about Guy, his experiences, what a veteran, fought for our country, as well as you never know, you might have flown on one of his flights one of these days in the past, but also he's an author too, and he's a master at with certified with NLP, neuro linguistic programming. We've been talking about thinking. We're talking about the fact that you can enjoy your everyday life in the most darkest moments if you're willing. And I think that's what you said earlier is that you got to be wanting that change, that with that desire, that's where it starts, is the desire, right?
Yes, it absolutely does. So if you don't mind, I'll just show you my book. This is Discovering Your Authentic Truth. It's
Absolutely.
been out for about 3 years or so, I think now. It's on Amazon. It was a bestseller when it was released. If you read the reviews on there, you will see people really, it resonates with a lot of people because of the way I wrote it. I wrote it in a way, and my goal in writing it was to get it into high schools, for high school students, for counselors, principals, to understand how important language is and how careless we tend to be with our language. And words really do matter. And so if I may, I'll just share. I was feeling stuck because I'm reading. I just saw that we have comments here, so I was starting to read some of the comments.
Okay. Yeah.
And they're good. They're really good comments, and I definitely would like to get to them. But let me just share really quick because I think you kind of asked me that question, and I never got to it. But I was feeling stuck. So I have been in this network marketing MLM business for some 20 years. And what would happen with me is I would build up a business. It would be doing really well, making a lot of money, and then the whole thing would fall apart. And it was a repetitive cycle. And because it was a repetitive cycle, I realized it wasn't anything else but in here. It was something up here that was messing this whole thing up. I was self-sabotaging in some way. And that's the reason why I originally seeked out to find some answers. And I was trying everything. I mean, I've read probably over 1,000 books. I did hypnotherapy, everything, trying to help myself get unstuck from this pattern, unwanted pattern that I was in. So I had the desire for the change. And I eventually came across this lady that I had seen once before a long time ago. And I started taking her courses. And in the very first course that I took, I had a major release of my anger. And it was through this process of NLP. And that was really my initial introduction to it. And then I took all her classes, getting master certified. I was facilitator for many of her courses for other people. And I would be one of those that she would call on to take, a troubled case that wasn't handling it in the classroom, to take them outside and do one-on-one work. So I realized that it was just coming natural for me. I had a natural knack for it. And then I had a post on somebody had a post on Facebook one day, and I made a comment to it. And this lady responded with, "Well, I'm married to a narcissistic husband." And I said, "Well, da, 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 da." And then she says, "Are you a life coach?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not a life coach. I go, that's not what I do. I mean, a life coach is a long period of time. I'm very short with what I do. Now, I never charged anyone for all the work that I did over those years that I was really actively involved. It was my way of giving back because I was given a great gift in releasing all this pain that I had kept inside me. And I started working with these people, and I realized it was literally, and not that I was just the guide, but that the work really worked. And these people's lives were changing dramatically. One girl was a 16-year-old girl that tried to commit suicide. And we talked on communication, and then in 10 minutes, bam, we completely erased it from her brain. We broke the record, shattered the record, inserted a new one. And now she's 22, 23 years old and just loving life and living a great life. And that's how quick NLP can be when you're working with a master that understands and how to guide the person and monitoring everything along the way. So I wrote the book for a lot of the reasons why I'm seeing these comments is to let people know that there are alternatives out there. And the book is just it's an initial introduction to help you understand that you're not alone, and that like you said in the intro, you're born in love, and then life happens and you get disconnected from your authentic truth, who you really are. And when we can help you get rid of that early on trauma, anger, sadness, fear, guilt, shame, and get you reconnected with who you really are, your I am, it is such a freeing event. It's amazing.
That's really awesome, because when you said about self-sabotage, I totally identify with that. I think a lot of people
A
can
lot of
identify.
people.
Things can get super good, super good, and then somehow, even like, it seems almost subconsciously or unconsciously, I'll have done something to just tear it down. And it's like, oh my goodness, start over. So, but now it is different for me now. And so that's a beautiful thing. And so we're going to want to make sure that people can reach out to you, because, of course, it just so fits in with what the LWN Live with Nature Foundation is doing. We
Yes.
have this a new life referral center where, if people are struggling for whatever reason, I mean, I've made so many great contacts like yourself, Guy, where we can help people get to counseling or addiction recovery, as well as, if you're local around here, food, clothing, housing, you name it. That's what we want to do, is help people out. And you mentioned, of course, paying it forward, giving back, because we have been given such a great gift that freed ourselves. Now, I would like to go to the comments. So let's do that. I'd like to acknowledge a couple people here. Robert Brooker, all the way from Toronto. We appreciate you. And Gigi Dimicino, thank you so very much. We appreciate you. We also have Dr. Jenny in the house. Thank you so very much for joining us, Dr. Jenny. And you would love her. She is so smart. 2019 Naturopath of the Year, a local business here, Age Vital, right down there on Main Street. And of course, if you've been watching me, you've been also seeing her too.
That's
So
right.
she's so awesome. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Jenny. Susan Day from Oregon. I just want to acknowledge everybody. We appreciate you. Let's go to some of the questions. Did you have one here that you were thinking that you wanted to address, Guy?
Well, I saw this one from Sabrina. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce her name, but
Which
she
one
says
here now?
it says that how are you supposed to broaden your horizons without broadening your horizons? I don't know, because you definitely have to broaden your horizons. You are either growing or you're decaying. There is no status quo. That's a fallacy, because if you're in as you're aging, you should always be striving to learn a little bit more. And if you're not, you're literally slowly starting to decay. So that's why reading, I mean, I've got an extensive library. I think it's so important. In order to change, for things to change, I must change. For things to get better, I must get better. If you're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, right? We all know that's the definition of insanity. So
Yeah.
in order to get something different from life than what you're currently experiencing, you have to do something different. You just have to. And things like this book, for a lot of people that have had really bad trauma in their past. I mean, this lady Linda, she literally wrote me a letter talking about how her whole life changed just from reading this book, because she was able to release a lot of that just in reading the book without actually doing an exercise from NLP. So you have to broaden the horizons.
Yes. Excellent. Excellent. Ruben, we appreciate you. He's also a Toastmaster. We hadn't touched on Toastmasters already yet, but that's okay. There's another question here. Why don't we answer that as well, Guy? I'll have you do that.
Yes, we keep ourselves
without moving past the trauma that holds us where we're at. We keep ourselves from moving forward.
True.
So it's about the trauma, that does hold us back. And it might be a safety blanket because it keeps us wrapped in that ego, like you were talking about, that holds us where we are, where it's comfortable. Growth doesn't begin in a place that's so comfortable. And I've had to learn that as well.
Absolutely. That's a very well written statement. I'm not sure if there's a question in there, but it's a very well.
That's just a thought. That's a great thought.
And so here's the challenge, somebody, a lot of people don't even remember what the trauma was. And that's a protection of the subconscious mind. And we don't want to necessarily bring that out unless the subconscious mind is ready to bring that out. Mm-hmm. So where I learned, there's traditional NLP, and what I learned, the master I learned from has what she calls evolved NLP. And NLP in itself is a science. What this lady had done is brings in the spiritual aspect. If you're a believer in God, if you're, a Buddhist, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's about the spirit. And so she elevates and brings love into the equation, where it's strict NLP, but is mostly just a science. It's like, okay, we're going to do this exercise and we're going to get the release. And what she did was bring it into this love. And I'm bringing that up because what she does is make it very safe. Create a very safe environment, because that's how I learned it. That's what I do for the people that I work with as well, so that you don't want to put a person into shock. You don't want to make the person uncomfortable. Going back to this statement, you want to make it comfortable for them, but in the same process, also broaden their horizons and help them grow and step outside of it. And that is why this is an art. This isn't something you read a book and then you go and practice with somebody, right? I mean, you need to be trained properly on how to do this, because you're messing around with some pretty sensitive stuff back there in the mind. And I make that disclaimer in my book as well. But when you do learn the art of it, it is amazing what you can do for somebody.
And I think the point here is that you're not growing in that comfort zone. You're growing when you're challenging yourself, and there might be fear involved. There might definitely fear, almost always. And the comfort zone, that's where I found myself having issues. When I got complacent, boy, I tell you, watch out. It's like it was better to feel uncomfortable. Now, I do want to go to this question with Ruben Lowing. Welcome, Ruben. We certainly appreciate you. He is also a veteran. He is a retired Navy SEAL out there in Texas, a really awesome guy. He is a Toastmaster as well. But he's asking about, what do you do about PTSD?
PTSD, I have not personally done the work with somebody with PTSD. When I was first learning it, that was the first thing that came to my mind. Man, I want to get this out into the world with people with PTSD. And I believe, again, I have not personally worked with it, but I believe done correctly, it would totally change a person's life that has PTSD and suffering with PTSD. Again, the challenge is when you're doing one of these exercises, you want to keep a person from going back into the event. And something like PTSD, which is so strong, it takes a very high level skilled person to ensure they don't slip into that event. And if you see that happening, you got to be able to pop them out of it right away. which sometimes you can't. I've been around where somebody's gone into an event, and man, trying to get them out of it is not very easy to do. It's a slight hypnotic trance. We're not putting people under like at a magic show or something like that. It's a slight hypnotic trance, and people will, like a dreamlike state, if you will, and people can get in there and it can become very, very real to them. So I have not personally messed around with somebody with PTSD, but I believe there are people trained in NLP that have.
Yes, and I've got multiple people that we could refer to as well, as a matter of fact, based on your specific need through the New Life Referral Center. So certainly reach out. We can try and put you in touch with somebody that can help, and that their specialty is PTSD. But what I also heard, I think, there as well, is it is about certainly the memories are there, but it's kind of about releasing them, and as well maybe acceptance of that situation for being what it was, but then putting in new stuff.
Well, and look at what Ruben just wrote now. That is exactly the opposite to what the VA does. I hate telling my story. Exactly. That's what traditional psychology does. The first thing they do, okay, tell me what's going on in your life.
Yeah.
To me, and the work that I do, that's the last thing I want to hear from you, because all I'm going to do is re-ingrain what the trauma is, right? The story is important. For instance, I'll use the 16-year-old girl that tried to commit suicide. When we sat down together the very first time, I'm eliciting questions. I don't care. I didn't know until 2-3 months after we had done the work did I hear her story and what had happened that night when she tried to kill herself. It didn't matter to her healing, because what mattered was the decision process that allowed her to reach the point that her life no longer mattered.
Mm-hmm.
And once I understood the decision process, then that gave me the direction on what we needed to do to eradicate that bad thinking, stinking thinking,
right,
and create new pathways that allows her to value herself. Now, PTSD, again, is a little bit different because it's an external trauma, being in an event, but it's the same kind of thing. I don't really necessarily, that specific event is not going to make a difference as to the approach that I'm going to use in order to release the trauma. What I want to do is get the person safe. I need to know that they're ready and willing to release that trauma. What we call in NLP is secondary gain. So like you got a person that has a repetitive problem or challenge, and you ask them, are you ready to release that right now? And they'll go, maybe. Well, that's a secondary gain. There's something holding on to, and that's the reason why they still have the problem. There's something subconsciously that's holding on. And until we get a congruent, yes, I'm ready to let it go right now, then the release won't happen. And so with the PTSD, it's a little bit more complicated, right? Because the trauma is so deep. But I do believe that it is very possible to release it, especially if you're working with a person in person. Through Zoom, it would be a little bit more difficult, but I definitely believe you could release it completely. I believe it wholeheartedly because it was programmed in. If it was programmed in, NLP says you can reprogram it.
Yes. I'm just, I'm so excited and looking forward to being certified. I tell you, it's exciting. I mean, I've got the basics, I think, already there in my mind, and it just kind of came. I'll just call that from God inspired, because I do have the higher power. I call that God giving me this knowledge, and knowing full well that when I implemented a regular routine that was consistent of healthy habits, and that included positive affirmation, surrounding myself with positive people like yourself, and so many others, that life can change. We can't change what happened to us in the past, but maybe, and I think maybe Ruben was alluding to I had to get to the point where I didn't care what other people thought, because I told them something about myself that in the past I would never say, because I was afraid of their judgment.
Yeah.
And so once I got past a concern of somebody's judgment, it got a little bit easier,
That's right.
because I just know that we all have these seeds of greatness within us, and that we just need to nurture those seeds of greatness, and pretty soon those become the regular habits, because we all are wonderful people. And I think that you said it here. I would just want to go back and quote that we are born in love, and then life happens, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. And so we can't change the past, but we don't have the future yet either. But what we do have is the present. And so we need to do something right here, right now, in that present. Now, I do want to also have you talk to us about, well, I mentioned we were going to talk about CBDs. I know that you've got this multi-level marketing. You are successful with that. CBD, everybody's talking about this stuff. I've certainly used it. Dr. Jenny is involved heavily in CBD and the education of that. Tell us about Silly by Design.
Thank you very much for the opportunity
Yeah.
to, because what we're doing is very different than anybody else in the world is doing with CBD. The biggest challenge with CBD is when you take a tincture, something like this, CBD oil, is you're
Yes.
only getting about 10% absorption, and there's reasons for that. The cells have, you got 37 something trillion cells in your body. Each one of those cells already has 34 CBD receptors, so you're hardwired for CBD. In
Yeah.
fact, scientists are now saying we have an endocannabinoid system, and maybe
Yes.
many of your listeners have already heard this, but you have an
Definitely.
endocannabinoid system, and what the scientists are starting to say now is that is the master regulator of your body. That if the ECS is a little bit out of whack, it's going to show up as a symptom somewhere else in your body.
Hmm.
So that's why the anecdotal evidence, we know that the anecdotal evidence of CBD works. And, for Ruben, I will tell you our product, which I'll explain here in just a second, has had tremendous, absolutely tremendous results for people with PTSD. We have a whole organization out there in Houston that is experiencing it. I have a customer or a member or distant relative who was involved in a police shooting, and he actually had to retire from the police force because the PTSD was so dramatic. And since he got on our product, he's living a normal life again. So what we do is, this was created by 4 scientists that have a collection of 9 PhDs. So, to have a product with 1 PhD behind it is pretty awesome, but to have 9 PhDs behind this technology is phenomenal. And what they do is they nanosize a 2,000 nanometer size particle of CBD. That's how big a typical CBD particle is. The challenge is, with all those cells in your body and those receptors, they can only absorb between 60 to 85 nanometers. So the 2,000 nanometer size particle is just too big to fit inside the cell. So it has to go through the digestive system, get broken down, and then eventually, that's why you're only getting about 10% absorption. And that's public information. So what these scientists do is they're nanosizing these particles all the way down to 3 nanometers. And then they have their own proprietary ultra pure water. They open up the water molecules and they put the CBD inside the water molecule and close it back up. So we're not water soluble or water infused. We are actually water encapsulated. To our knowledge, there's no other company in the world doing what we're doing with nutritionals, because it's not just CBD. I'll just show you the bottle. It's not just CBD and CBG. It also has 90 vitamins. It has all 54 trace and macro minerals. It has
Yes.
nootropics, which is for mental
Oh,
clarity. It has primary adaptogens and electrolytes. In fact, one of the 4 scientists says that the electrolytes in our product is the most important ingredient. So what we know is that we get results extremely quickly, within days to a week to 2 weeks, especially skin issues and that. And so anyhow, that's what we're doing, and it's different. There's no taste. You get 99% absorption in 1 minute, and it
wow.
goes. We surmise there's enough CBD and CBG, which is just a capful of this. It's a very little amount, and there's enough CBD and CBG because of nanosizing to go to every single one of those 37 trillion cells. So it's pretty phenomenal. It's just a
Yeah,
very,
that's
very different approach to what we're doing.
clearly CBD is an important factor, and I was learning that because I've been educated somewhat. I certainly don't know it all. Like you seem to be very well versed in understanding the science behind it. But Dr. Jenny certainly taught me a lot about this, and the fact, like you said, is that what, 36 different receptors in our bodies. I mean, we're built to have CBD, and it helps us, and it's being proven, and it's helped me. I know it has in
Yeah,
the
it's
past.
natural food. We're just giving the body what it needs so that it can go to work with itself. And the other thing is that that's very different from us than and many other companies out there. We are actually CGMP, which is Current
Yeah,
Good Manufacturing Practices Compliant, which is an FDA regulation. So the FDA is regulating everything. And basically what it means to the consumer is that what's on our label is what's actually inside the bottle. That's been an issue with CBD in the past.
it's
And on our
true.
bottle, it states THC free. And the thing is, we have not even a trace of THC because we're not extracting. The plants
Yeah,
that we are utilizing, we're getting our CBD, CBG. It's a 50-50 blend of CBD and CBG. The plants we're utilizing have been cultivated for over 20 years and are grown without THC. So it's whole plant hemp oil, but minus the THC. And it says
yeah,
THC free on there, and we're FDA regulated. So yes, and I've had employees of the airlines that got pulled for drug tests and had no problems at all. That we just
there
don't
you
have it
go.
in there.
We are out of time, so I want you to
Oh,
quickly
okay.
just tell them, viewers, how they could reach you. The best way to reach you, is it through the .com here that we had up earlier? The
Yeah,
Sealy.com?
Sealy, our guy at Sealy Guy, CILI, guy at SealyGuy.com. That's my email, or you could
Okay,
just use GuyBerlando.com. My website for my book is GuyBerlando.com, my first and last name. And my website for the CBD is guy at SealyGuy.com.
yeah,
So,
GuyBerlando.com works well. I think
or
that we
GuyBerlando at
can get to you
gmail.com.
through
Yeah.
there. I think that's a
Yeah.
good one there as well. So we want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. I want to ask you back, Guy, will you come back and speak with us again? I would love to
I'd
have
love
you,
to.
because we didn't get to half of probably what I wanted to talk about.
That was great. I really appreciate it, Stephen. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much. Everybody stay tuned here. We want to acknowledge our sponsors. We will be back on Wednesday. Look forward to that. We will be back at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. We'll look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, let's have a fantastic week. Know that we care about you, and if we can help in any ways, just reach out and send us a message. Thank you so very much for joining us this evening.
Bye.
We let our bathtub go too long. It had rust in it. It had deep pitting in it. There were chips. I, quite frankly, thought it was unrepairable.
Total Coatings is a family-owned and operated bathtub and shower refinishing company. We've been around since 2006, but we use a exclusive non-toxic porcelain coating that was developed over 60 years ago by a franchise in California. So the product is very well established. We refinish bathtubs, showers, wall tile, countertops, and even sinks. Customers want to know what makes our product different, and that's, of course, the exclusive non-toxic porcelain. We also don't acid etch the surface, so you don't have to leave your home because of noxious fumes.
I was completely and utterly shocked. It looked like a brand new bathtub. I would recommend Total Coatings to anybody.